Jasmine Hartin was the glamorous face of luxury in Amber Shore, and Ruel Daxon was the decorated officer sworn to protect its peace. But when his lifeless body washed up on the beach, everything they stood for unraveled into a chilling conspiracy, soaked in secrets, betrayal, and murder. Jasmine Hartin was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, with her golden hair, piercing grey eyes, and a confidence that made her seem untouchable. She had become a household name in the quiet, sun-drenched town of Amber Shore. The town itself was built on turquoise waters, luxury resorts, and whispered scandals, and Jasmine fit into it like a jewel in a crown. She wasn't born into this world, but she married into it, into power, money, and influence. Her husband, Bennett Cale, owned a chain of properties, including the grandest resort on the coast. He rarely made public appearances, preferring backroom deals and quiet dominance over the island's economy. Most people saw Jasmine as lucky, even enviable. She attended charity galas, organized wellness retreats, and posed on the covers of travel magazines. But there was a darker edge to her life that no camera captured. Despite the sunshine and silk sheets, Jasmine often seemed distracted, even cold. Those closest to her described moments of strange silence, as if she were hiding something or waiting for something to happen. Her closest ally in recent months was a man named Captain Ruel Daxon, a mysterious former military officer who had settled in Amber Shore after retiring from international security work. He was tall, weathered, and secretive, someone who had clearly seen more than he said. Many wondered why Jasmine kept such a man so close. Rumours began to circulate that the two were more than just friends. They were seen walking alone on the beaches late at night, having intense conversations near the marina, and disappearing for hours at a time. People whispered, but no one dared confront them. Captain Daxon had a reputation for silence and loyalty. Jasmine had power and a name. Together, they were untouchable. One evening, during a private beach gathering hosted by an investor from the mainland, Jasmine arrived dressed in a pearl grey gown that shimmered like the sea under moonlight. Captain Daxon was there too, though he stayed at the edge of the gathering, barely speaking. Witnesses would later recall that they left the party together just before midnight, walking barefoot across the sand, holding their shoes in hand. It was the last time anyone saw Captain Daxon alive. Hours later, Jasmine returned to her resort alone. The staff remembered her strange appearance, her dress soaked at the hem, a scratch across her cheek, and sand clinging to her arms and ankles. She didn't say anything to anyone. She walked past the reception desk without looking up, ignoring the concierge who greeted her. A surveillance camera caught a single moment of her entering the service hallway barefoot, her expression unreadable. By morning, the sun rose over Amber Shore like any other day, but that illusion was quickly shattered. A local fisherman, heading out before dawn, discovered the body of Captain Daxon, half buried in the sand near a secluded stretch of beach. His shirt was wet, his eyes wide open, and a thin trail of blood had run into the tide. One shot to the head, clean, precise, and silent. No one in the area had reported hearing a gunshot. No tourists had seen anything suspicious. It was as if the darkness itself had swallowed the truth. The police sealed the beach within an hour, but news travelled faster than caution. By mid-morning, Reporters were already flying in, hungry for details. A dead former soldier, a socialite heiress, and a missing gun. The story was too perfect to ignore. Jasmine remained inside her resort suite the entire day. When questioned, she gave a vague account of the night, claiming she had tripped on rocks and couldn't remember anything after that. Her story had gaps, but she was calm, almost eerily so. Investigators didn't find any signs of forced entry or struggle. No weapon was recovered at the scene. All they had was a dead man, a single bullet wound, and the haunting silence of the woman who had been with him last. Captain Ruel Daxon's death sent quiet shockwaves through Amber Shore. It wasn't just the brutality of the killing that unsettled people. It was the silence. A single gunshot, perfectly placed behind his ear, and yet no one heard a thing. There were no signs of struggle, no shell casings, and no footprints leading to or from the scene. The tide had not yet washed him away, as if the ocean itself had paused in mourning. The way his body lay, face turned slightly to the left, arms limp beside him, looked more like sleep than death, until one noticed the dark dried blood at the base of his skull. News of the killing spread quickly, but official details were scarce. Police issued a statement that an investigation was underway, but they didn't name Jasmine Hartin publicly, at least not yet. Still, the entire island knew who had last been seen with the victim. Jasmine's name circled in whispers among hotel, lobbies, beach bars, and taxi drivers. The resort's staff were tight-lipped, but a few anonymously confirmed that she had returned alone and barefoot, appearing shaken but not hysterical. Her dress had been damp, her eyes distant. Some believed she was in shock, others believed she was hiding something. When detectives searched the crime scene again the next morning, they found little more than footprints scattered by wind and tide. A small indentation in the sand suggested where Daxon had fallen. Further, up the beach, half buried by leaves, lay a cigarette butt smeared with lipstick and a fragment of polished glass, possibly from a broken phone screen. Forensics would later confirm the lipstick matched one of Jasmine's designer shades. But no one could say when it had been left there, or if it was even connected. Jasmine was brought in for questioning that same afternoon. She wore a cream blouse and sunglasses, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice was low, her answers brief. She told police she and Daxon had walked together to the water's edge. She remembered talking about the moonlight and the waves. Then, she said, she slipped on some rocks and hit her head. After that, everything was a blur. She claimed she woke up alone, disoriented, and returned to the resort not realizing how much time had passed. There were faint bruises on her arms and a scratch across her cheek, but her story didn't fully explain them. Police asked about the weapon. Jasmine claimed she never saw one, yet the bullet removed from Daxon's skull was identified as a .38 caliber hollow point, fired from a custom silver-plated pistol. That same type of weapon was registered under her husband's name, Bennett Cale. Bennett, however, was verifiably out of the country on business during the entire week. Flight records, customs logs, and video surveillance from an international conference confirmed his alibi. With no murder weapon found and no witnesses, the case stood on shaky ground. Still, doubts lingered. Jasmine's story had gaps. The injury she described was minor, yet she claimed memory loss. Her clothing from that night had been laundered before the police could examine it. Her cell phone was missing, later traced to a signal that vanished offshore just before dawn. Divers were sent to scan the surrounding waters, but they came back empty-handed. As rumours mounted, the police faced pressure to make progress. Detectives quietly began reviewing Jasmine's financial records, looking for any sign of stress, blackmail, or secret transactions. What they found instead was silence. No large withdrawals, no suspicious payments. Everything was clean, almost too clean. Meanwhile, the media began circling like vultures. Tabloids published old photos of Jasmine and Daxon together, speculating about a romantic affair. One publication even ran a headline claiming the heiress and the hitman, painting their relationship as a fatal attraction gone wrong. But beneath all the speculation, the central mystery remained. Who pulled the trigger, and why? As days turned into weeks, the initial frenzy began to fade, but the unease did not. The quiet beach town felt colder, more cautious. Residents avoided eye contact. Guests at Jasmine's resort began cancelling their bookings. Despite the lack of charges, her presence had become a reminder of something unsolved, something dangerous. The bullet that killed Ruel Daxon had not just ended a life. It had opened a silence so deep even the sea refused to speak. Detective Axton Vereen arrived on the island 3 weeks after the murder, sent by a higher office in response to the growing pressure from the media and international observers. Known for his unorthodox methods and cold precision, Vereen had a reputation for unearthing truths hidden under carefully constructed lies. He reviewed the initial findings and quickly realized something wasn't right. The original investigation had stalled because everyone was looking in one direction, at Jasmine Hartin. But Vereen believed there were layers in this case no one had peeled back yet. The first thing he did was order a fresh sweep of the crime scene using specialized equipment. A drone scan of the coastline revealed an unusual pattern in the sand near the site where Ruel Daxon's body was discovered. The pattern indicated something heavy had been dragged a short distance before being positioned more naturally. It wasn't visible to the naked eye anymore due to tides, but heat mapping and terrain analysis confirmed it. Daxon hadn't simply collapsed where he died. He had been moved. That changed everything. Next, Vereen turned to digital forensics. Jasmine's phone was still missing, but cell tower data revealed that her device had remained active for 2 hours after she claimed to have blacked out. Not only that, but it pinged off a cell tower located near an old lighthouse several miles from the party. That area had been considered irrelevant by the original team, but Vereen ordered an immediate search. The lighthouse had long been decommissioned, but it had a small power source and a weather-worn surveillance camera mounted on the corner. Most assumed it no longer worked, but Vereen's team recovered its data card, and within the fragmented footage they found something extraordinary. A 2-second clip from 12:16 a.m. showing a figure dragging something across the sand. So the Gisha resolution was poor, the angle skewed, but the footage clearly showed movement in the dark and a faint reflection of something metallic in the figure's hand. Vereen's team enhanced the clip, and what they discovered raised new questions. The person in the video wasn't alone. A second figure, taller and wearing a hooded raincoat, stood at the edge of the frame before walking out of view. There had been someone else on the beach that night. While reviewing phone tower data in more detail, The detectives found another signal that had been active near the lighthouse at the same time. It belonged to a burner phone. When they traced the signal's path over the past month, it matched multiple known locations around Jasmine's resort, including the staff-only docks and a closed guest villa. The phone had never sent messages or made calls, but it had connected to unsecured networks just long enough to leave a digital fingerprint. This burner phone was eventually found in a rental locker near a dilapidated pier, after a tip came through from an anonymous source. Inside the locker was more than just the phone. There was a blood-stained towel, a lock of blonde hair tied with a thin red thread, and an unused keycard for a hotel room registered under a fake name. The towel's DNA confirmed the blood belonged to Ruel Daxon. The hair matched Jasmine's, but the most chilling discovery came when forensic experts recovered deleted data from the phone. Among the fragments was a single unsent video, only a few seconds long. It was shaky, dark, and filled with the sound of crashing waves. But in it, Jasmine stood on a boat facing Captain Daxon. Behind them, barely visible, was a third person, in a dark raincoat, wearing gloves and standing perfectly still. The figure never moved, never spoke. The camera cut off just as Daxon seemed to turn his head, reacting to something. Vereen didn't jump to conclusions. He built timelines, tracked movements, and studied psychological profiles. One thing was clear to him now. This wasn't just a crime of passion, nor was it an accident. It was a controlled, intentional act. Jasmine may have been involved, but she wasn't alone. There was another player in the shadows, someone with access, knowledge, and a reason to silence Daxon. The investigation had just cracked open, and beneath the surface lay something far more dangerous than anyone had guessed. Detective Vereen began to focus on the quiet spaces between the facts, the pauses, the unspoken connections, the parts no one had thought to examine. While the world fixated on Jasmine Hartin, Vereen looked elsewhere. He reviewed every person linked to Jasmine in the weeks leading up to the murder, especially the ones who stayed out of the spotlight. That's when a name kept surfacing in small, overlooked ways. Kieran Voss. Kieran wasn't someone people talked about much. He had worked as private security for Jasmine's resort for just under a year. Officially, he was responsible for surveillance management and guest protection. But Vereen learned that Kieran had once been dismissed from a tactical intelligence unit in Europe under murky circumstances. He was disciplined, quiet, and lived off the grid in a rented house near the jungle outskirts. His record was clean, but too clean, almost polished, and unlike the other staff members, Kieran had never submitted a statement after the murder. No one had even questioned him. Vereen requested access to the resort's security archives. Most of the footage from the night of the murder had been conveniently corrupted due to a scheduled maintenance cycle, a phrase Vereen had come to associate with planned sabotage. But deep in a backup drive, buried under mislabeled files, Vereen found recovered fragments. In one of them, time-stamped 2 hours before Daxon's death, Kieran could be seen escorting Jasmine through the staff entrance, not out toward the beach, as she had claimed. She wasn't stumbling or injured. She looked purposeful. Kieran followed close behind, speaking into an earpiece. Another fragment showed Daxon at the marina, pacing beside a locked boat. He appeared anxious. Minutes later, Headlights flashed in the distance, and someone handed him a small black object, possibly a hard drive or flash disk. Then, the camera feed cut off. The pieces began forming a troubling picture. Daxon hadn't just been a friend or bodyguard. He had been collecting information. Rumours had long circulated that Jasmine's husband, Bennett Cale, was tied to illegal land deals and offshore laundering. Daxon may have discovered something and intended to bring it to light. The unsent video on the burner phone supported this theory. Daxon had confronted Jasmine, possibly warning her, but someone else was watching, someone who couldn't afford for that truth to get out. Kieran's name finally surfaced in a financial audit when Vereen traced a wire transfer from an unlisted Cayman account to a crypto wallet tied to a ghost identity. The same wallet had received large sums shortly after Daxon's death. No trail pointed directly to Cale, but the chain of transactions led back to a dummy corporation registered to one of Cale's former associates. It was enough to prove motive, if not yet intent. Vereen brought Kieran in for a formal interview. The man remained calm, answering every question with crisp efficiency. But when asked about the night of the murder, his answers became vague. He claimed to have been off duty and asleep at the time, yet phone metadata placed him at the resort docks during the critical window. He offered no explanation. After his release, Kieran disappeared. His home was abandoned, his personal belongings gone. Surveillance caught a man resembling him boarding a small private plane 2 islands away under a fake name. Vereen issued an alert, but no further sightings followed. Jasmine, meanwhile, remained under close watch. She had returned to public life cautiously, attending a charity event where she appeared composed but fragile. The press called it a brave return. Yet Vereen noticed something in her posture. Restlessness. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the architect either. She was caught in something far more complex than betrayal or guilt. She was carrying the weight of someone else's secret. A week later, an unmarked envelope arrived at the police station. Inside was a photograph. Jasmine and Daxon sitting in a boat, the same boat from the unsent video. Standing behind them was the shadowy figure in the raincoat, face now visible. It was Kieran Voss. He was watching them, not protecting. This changed everything. The man who had sworn to protect Jasmine had been the one orchestrating control from the background. Not out of loyalty, but out of survival. The truth was drawing closer, but so was something far more dangerous. Someone was still pulling strings, and Vereen now understood. The killing of Ruel Daxon wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a deeper, calculated conspiracy. The island of Amber Shore was no longer the tranquil escape it once seemed. Tourists arrived with curiosity instead of relaxation, drawn by the whispers of murder and cover-up. News crews lingered near the resort gates, while Jasmine Hartin remained, under unofficial house arrest, her every move watched by plainclothes officers. But despite the calm surface, a storm was brewing underneath. Detective Axton Vereen wasn't done. He knew he was inches away from exposing something that reached far beyond a single gunshot on a beach. For weeks, the investigation had pointed to Kieran Voss as the orchestrator of a deliberate and well-planned execution. He had the training, the access, and now the motive, silencing Ruel Daxon, who had reportedly uncovered incriminating files tied to Bennett Cale's real estate empire and offshore activities. But something about the timeline still bothered Vereen. Kieran had disappeared too easily. Someone had helped him vanish, someone with power and influence. The kind of help that required resources and silence. That silence cracked when a former resort employee, Thomas Elric, came forward anonymously. He had worked in IT maintenance and had access to off-site backup systems the primary investigators missed. Elric provided a digital drive containing logs and encrypted files Daxon had stored under a hidden user profile. When decrypted, the files revealed a detailed map of shell companies, offshore transfers, and land acquisition plans that directly tied Bennett Cale to multiple illegal operations, land grabbing, environmental violations, and fraudulent ownership through false trusts. But the documents also revealed something else. Notes in Daxon's handwriting. He had become suspicious of Jasmine herself. One note read, "She knows more than she says. Not afraid. Almost like she's waiting for someone to clean it up." Daxon, it seemed, was starting to believe Jasmine wasn't just caught in the middle. She might have been preparing for the fallout in advance. Vereen reopened interviews with past staff and business contacts. A troubling pattern emerged. A few months before the murder, Jasmine had begun moving assets into foreign trusts under her own name, separate from Cale's empire. She had purchased 2 properties offshore and retained a high-profile lawyer from Geneva known for crisis management. Everything pointed to premeditation, if not of the murder, then of a clean break from the life she shared with her husband. It became clear that Jasmine had been playing her own game. Daxon's murder may not have been her idea, but she allowed it to happen. Whether through fear or strategy, she did nothing to stop it. Her blackout story was a lie. She remembered everything. The final breakthrough came when a customs agent in a nearby country reported a passenger travelling under the name Marek Vallon, who matched Kieran Voss's description. He had boarded a yacht under diplomatic protection, which was traced to a shell company tied to a foreign embassy. Kieran wasn't just a runaway. He was a ghost built to vanish. Someone powerful had scrubbed him clean and relocated him, likely in exchange for loyalty or silence. Armed with all the evidence, Vereen presented his findings to an international task force. Arrest warrants were issued for Kieran Voss and Bennett Cale. Interpol flagged their names. Jasmine was finally charged, not with murder, but with obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to conceal a crime. It wasn't the full justice Ruel Daxon deserved, but it was a beginning. The trial was messy and high-profile. Jasmine pleaded guilty to reduce charges in exchange for her cooperation. She was sentenced to 5 years in a low-security facility. The press called it a slap on the wrist. But Vereen knew the real punishment was psychological. Jasmine had built a life on appearances, and now she had to live with the truth, exposed and alone. Ruel Daxon's name was engraved on a stone near the beach where he died. Visitors sometimes pause there, unaware of the storm that once raged, behind the silence. But Vereen remembers. He knows that some crimes leave behind more than victims. They leave shadows. And Jasmine Hartin's shot in the dark had cast one that would linger for years.